So to create an eyeball, we're going to give ourselves a little bit of a twist here. We're going to have to rethink a few things. You can sculpt eyeballs just with the clay buildup brush. You just come in, clay buildup, and you could just come in and build this. But I'm going to show you another trick that I'm a real big fan of because I think it's a little bit more controllable. Those are horrible. All right. If I was doing this a little bit, even that method you can get better eyes than I just got. But let me show you the other method. So the other method is that we come in here to the brush palette, press I, and we select the Insert Sphere brush and drag those in. But it's telling us you either need to delete your subdivision levels or you need to freeze it. Okay, what that means is that we've got two subdivision levels, 1 and 2. So we either need to delete those, start over, in which case we would say delete lower and keep it at this high level, or we would go down to a lower level and delete the higher. Or, if you want to, you can freeze the geometry. And what that means, in a nutshell, and this is a little complicated of a thing to explain right now, but in a nutshell, it means that you take this geometry that's here and you just throw it off into space over here. You just store it in a bucket. There's just a little bucket in here, and it goes right into that bucket and into the memory, and it doesn't come back until you press that button again. And then the form is adjusted to fit. And that's what I want to show you right now. That's the best approach for us to do this. So I'm going to just click Freeze Subdivision Levels. You can see we no longer have subdivision levels. It's taken this form, let's just say it's thrown it in there, and it's ready for us at a later point in time. So now I can use this brush, and there's a trick with eyes that I should point out. They're confusing. And the only way that I've really discovered that makes the most sense when I'm explaining it, teaching it, and doing it myself is if I do not envision the eye in the center of that orbit. If I do that, invariably the eye is too low. And you'll get what I had the first time I sculpted the eyes. The upper eyebrow will be too high. Instead, what I want you to do is envision this orbit of the eye kind of heading up, and the eye is already protected by this brow. A little bit. It's already protected by it. Remember, eyes are incredibly important to us as humans, so of course, evolutionarily speaking, they're protected by something strong, like our brow, like the frontal bone, which is pure bone. If I do that, I'm always better off. How wide do we make them? Take a moment. Think about how wide this is. Think about where you want the top and the bottom, and you're going to have to make assumptions, and then you're going to have to change your assumptions. You're not going to get it right the first time. That's totally fine. But remember that that formula where you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yada yada. So you've got 1 eye, 2 eyes, 3 eyes, 4 eyes, 5. So 5 eyes wide. And then our eyes are going to be right in here with 1 eye in between them as spacing and 1 eye off to the ears or to the side of the head, or however that's going to work. Okay, that's going to vary based on basically how much fat somebody has in their face, and that's a factor of age, diet, metabolism, a bunch of stuff. So it is part of the character that you're going to develop. So what's going to be static is this line right here. Okay, that line right there is called the frontal cephenoidal process of the maxilla. Basically, the maxilla, did I say the maxilla? Sorry. Frontal cephenoidal process of the zygomatic. Okay, this is the zygomatic bone. Okay, it meets the maxilla right in here, and this becomes maxilla. Nasal bone opening, yada yada yada. Frontal bone is up here. There you go. And a little bit more, but let's just get it there. So this frontal sphenoidal process of the maxilla, it's bone, it's static. That's one of the things, really important to our descending staircase of arches. Right there, that frontal sphenoidal process of the zygomatic represents that descending arch from the brow. So you need that to be inwards to the zygomatic. And you need it to be, relatively stable. The eye is not going to pass that. It's just not going to. So what I'll do is pull, remember this line I had here? I'm not going to pull in the center of that. I'm going to go up a little bit. And experiment. Try to get it higher up. Give yourself a challenge. Okay, and try to measure it. Okay, that's pretty reasonable. I just did it. There's a little bit of extra space right in there. And in my view, it's probably acceptable. Let me just double check. Yeah. What I'm doing is making sure that the sphere and this sphere are able to have another sphere in between them, and that they are higher up so that the brow kind of protects them and descends over them. Okay, now then I'll look at them from a side view, and we've got some adjustment to do because they're literally growing out of the brow. And so I've introduced you to the insert sphere brush, but now I've got to introduce you to something else. And that's up here at the top. This is what we call transpose, these guys up here. Move, scale, and rotate. And it's called transpose. Okay, this is one of the features that was there. It was developed when I was there, and I remember asking the guys, they came in and said they wanted to call this transpose, and I was like, what the heck does transpose mean? I have no idea what that means. And I was like, can we try this? Can we try that? Can we try this? Why don't we just call it the move or a gyro, something like that. And basically transpose, it means that it's taking one set of mathematical equations, which is the vertices x, y, and z, and it is transposing those to new coordinates. That's really the reason behind naming it transpose. If you look up transpose, you'll see it's actually a mathematical term. So let's go move, and we get this little beast, which can be problematic. So I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to turn perspective off. You're going to be safer working with it off. And then let me explain this. Circle, circle, line. Okay, the line allows you to move the circle, the whole thing. It's like this is the staff part of the equation. The circles are where the action happens, but there's two different actions. You either move the axes so that you can say move it down like this. You just click this outer ring and you drag down, and you'll move the position of it while keeping this other end point intact. If you click the end point and you move, then things start to happen. So let me explain that. As I'm hovering over, notice I can alter this orange line, nothing happens. But if I go inside of that orange dot, I get a red dot. If I click that red dot, then I can start to do odd things, transform this. Now what you're going to want to do is go to the center dot. And see how it's white? Click the center dot, and that's a transpose. It allows you to move this around. So I'm going to just move it back like that. It's definitely some work that needs to be done, but this is good. And make sure that the high point is a little bit more towards the top. Cool. Draw mode. Perspective is on. And one more thing I'm going to throw at you. If you want, go into your draw palette and set your angle of view to 50 or 35. It's a little bit more natural when it comes to a face. The 90 is really set for a body or a character. So they had to make a distinction between them, and that's what they did. So I'm going to leave it at 35. So again, draw, angle of view, 35. Let's do it at 50. There you go. You can see now it looks quite small. Alec Baldwin kind of style. Small eyes in there. 90 was what I was creating them, and it looks better at that. But let's get it back to 50. Let's check our measurements. We have a lot of space between these guys now that we've moved them back. So Control click to invert the mask. I'm going to switch over here to the move brush, and we can adjust the shape a little bit. Let's get that narrowed in. There you go. Control click, scale, drag out, click and drag out, and then you can play with scale, but if you want to, you need to turn LSIM on, this guy right here, and then do it. Otherwise they scale incorrectly. So I'm going just a tiny bit. Alright, I've introduced you to a lot. Back into draw here, and now let's go into the move brush, and I'm going to kind of click in the center and press Alt. What I'm trying to do is get some geometry to move more towards me. You see, there's geometry behind that sphere, but I'm trying to pull some geometry forward. And I know there's a lot of information we're covering here, but this is really, really important. This is one of the more important stages, actually. Okay, now I'm pulling that upper eyelid out, the lower eyelid out, and I'm going to be mindful of this topology line. I'm going to try to find a topology line that works for me. They're not all going to work, and it's not going to work for everything. But I am going to spend a little bit of extra time to see if I can make that happen. Because if I can, it simplifies my life later on. Press Alt. Let's turn polyframe on so we can really see that. Lowering the draw size so it's more like I'm affecting one individual knot. And pull them back up. Look at it from below and really pull that out. And this is one of the ways that I work with form is instead of using the clay buildup brush, I'll use this move brush, press Alt and move these guys around to create really solid lines. See, this is going to really allow me to get that caruncle on the inside of the eye quite nicely. If I don't keep putting it too low, that is. You gotta find what's happening. There's some odd shading going on. So let me see if I can even this out a little bit. Pressing F to frame that, or scale to zoom out. Okay. Now you're not going to get topology the way you want it on the side, so this is where we're going to have to simply divide the model to get better form in there. And that's not going to be too big of a problem. We're going to definitely be able to do that. So we have the upper eyelid defined. Let's try to do the same thing with the lower eyelid. It really makes a difference. This is going to be about a 15, oh, it's already at 16. It's going to be about a 20-minute tutorial. We've got about another 4 minutes of this. And taking this extra time on the eye really will make a difference. Okay, vertice by vertice now. Moving it up, pressing Alt to pull it out, and then I move it up. Alt to pull it out, then I move it up. Alt, move it up. Alt, move it up. Alt, move it up. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Look at it from above, and then we can kind of push this back in. But this is the thickness of that eyelid, so, you know, don't be afraid to make it too thick. It's nice to have some thickness there. But it's just like the lower eyelid, lower lip, I mean. It needs to be subservient. So that upper eyelid needs to really come down on top. Also, I may not have mentioned this, but this is all neutral zone. You can click in there and do navigation shortcuts when you're zoomed in really close, or you just use these hotkeys here. So that's why you see me clicking right in there. Polyframe. Okay, and if you want, mask out that upper, just so you save it. And then let's move this. Okay, you might have to pull these back out, but you know, that's just par for the course. Okay, we're going to end up sculpting, clay buildup. We're going to put a little bit of that external angular process of the frontal bone right there as it connects to the frontal sphenoidal process of the maxilla. Coming, not the maxilla, I always say that, down to the zygomatic. Start to sharpen that a little. But don't do too much. I'm going to undo a bit of that except for that external process. And let me pull this. Well, let's leave it at that. Because we need to unfreeze this. Sorry, I left you with a half thought. Okay, let me, I've undone my mask. If I start to adjust the shape of this, any of these guys now, I start to, let's switch over to the move brush. I start to affect everything. So, last thing I want to show you for this particular part is how to mask things back out. So I know your brain's fried, but take a moment, stop, listen to what I'm going to say next, and then we're gonna pause. To mask this eye out, just go to Move, Control click on the eye, and drag to the surface, or Control click on the body and drag to the eye. Just make sure to switch back to Draw. So again, you can go to Rotate, it doesn't matter. Control click, and it'll mask them in either direction, one or the other. So the next thing, Control click and drag, that we're going to look at is dividing this, adjusting the shape, because now we've got some perspective distortion. But the very next thing we need to do is unfreeze these subdiv levels. So I'm going to do that, and that's our last little bit. All right, there you go. Control click and drag, and this is where it wasn't able to transfer, or there was some kind of move between the forms that didn't line up, like we sculpted here and we pushed this in, and we definitely pulled these guys out. So we need to integrate these. Not a big deal. We have these subdivision levels. And we have some clean topology lines to boot. So there we go.